Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
And with us here in Stirling, a Conservative MP who campaigned for Brexit, Kwasi Kwarteng, Labour's former Europe Minister who resigned from the Shadow Cabinet over Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, Chris Bryant, the SNP's cultural spokesman at Westminster, John Nicholson, the editor-in-chief of the magazine Money Week, Somerset-Webb, and one of the founders of Scotland's radical independence campaign, Catboy. Thank you very much. And, of course, from home, you can join in this debate on Facebook, on Twitter, or you can text on 83981. Our first question tonight comes from Jack Palmer, please.
Should the British government take advantage of Nigel Farage and President-elect Trump's very own special relationship?
Ha-ha, we saw them together outside the Golden Lift in Trump Towers this week. Nigel Farage and President-elect Trump. Chris Bryant, should we take advantage of this relationship?
Well, I mean, there's a couple, isn't it? Abbott and Costello. The thing that really strikes me is it's a bit like when Vinnie Jones decided, he tweeted that there were too many immigrants in this country, so he was going to America, where obviously he'd be an immigrant. And he couldn't see any irony in this. My anxiety is that it seems to me that Nigel Farage wants to be Donald Trump's representative to Britain, rather than the other way around. And I know some people have talked about whether he should be made a member of the House of Lords. I don't think anybody, incidentally, should be appointed as a member of the House of Lords. I think the House of Lords should be elected. But
the point is, he did get to see the Prime Minister, the President before the Prime Minister. I mean, he was there.
Yes, I know. Well, and the Prime Minister was, you know, I think 11th in the number of the 11th person to be phoned by Donald Trump, which is really unusual. Normally, Britain's in, like, the second or third.
So is there some use to be made of Farage's relationship?
Well, no, because in the end, we have an elected Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister should do business on behalf of this country with Donald Trump. I have real worries about the state of the world with Donald Trump as president, if I'm honest. You know, he said one of the most bizarre things is that people seem to let him get away with talking utter nonsense. He has said about climate change that it's just a myth dreamt up by the Chinese to stop the American economy prospering. Well, even if you just leave aside the fact that it is a very well-proven scientific fact that climate change has been affected by human exploitation of carbon fossil fuels, there's no internal logic either to Trump's point, because actually the Chinese have been the slowest at tackling climate change of anybody in the world because they wanted to keep on growing their economy. So my anxiety is that Donald and Nigel have very similar views on so many things, and I think that they are profoundly dangerous and damaging to this country and to the world.
Okay. So, given that Boris Johnson, our Foreign Secretary, Kwasi, said that Trump was unfit to hold the office of President, do you think the Prime Minister should turn to Farage instead?
I don't think that Theresa May needs Nigel Farage to build up the special relationship. Now, what Trump does or who his friends are, that's nothing to do with us. He can see Nigel Farage when he wants, and God knows what they get up to together, but they're quite happy we'll be quite happy for them to do whatever they're doing. But we have proper diplomatic channels. I think he gave a very respectful phone call to Theresa May. They got on very cordially. And look, I mean, Chris can wrap himself in a cloak of moral virtue and say very bad things about Donald Trump. I think he's probably quite a nasty individual on a personal basis. But the fact is, he's President of the United States, and people in government have to deal with him. People around the world have to deal with him. We can wish him away, we can stick our heads in the sand and pretend that he'll go away. But he won't. He's a reality, and we have to deal with him. and I think we'll make the relationship work.
I get that, of course. I mean, when Berlusconi was head of Italy, we had to do business with him.
That's right.
I get that, even though he was a terrible man, and terrible in many of the same ways. But my anxiety about Trump is you have to sup with the devil with a very long spoon. And this is the problem. I mean, his relationship with Putin, for instance, seems already to have delivered Russia signing its way out of the International Criminal Court. I think that is bad for justice around the world.
Let's come back to the question. You, sir. The man there with spectacles. You, sir, what do you think?
Given that Donald Trump and Nigel Farage have actually created a new word for the English dictionary with post-truth, should these men ever be trusted again? They go back in their word so often about so many things and promise so much, and it's all a fiction. Absolute fiction.
Who's saying rubbish? Yes, go on then.
Donald Trump was elected
Of course he was.
by the American people.
That's right.
And the people in Britain just can't understand that the American people believe in democracy. And democracy has been lowered to mob rule. When you don't like the decision of a referendum, you disagree with it. You go to court and you get rid of it.
Okay.
And the SNP should know this because we had a referendum. We voted no, they didn't like it. They had a referendum on Brexit. They didn't like that. Let's go to court. We don't like Brexit. And now they don't like Trump. Democracy has been overruled by mob rule, and those people have been on the losing side of every single election, and thank God I've been on the winning side of everyone. That's exactly mob rule wins. No democracy, mob rule.
I didn't see who you were pointing at when you said those people.
I think me.
Was it him? I'm going to go to Cat
The
Boyd
SNP
anyway.
were on the losing side.
Oh, OK, fine. Point made.
On 5 different occasions. I'm the winner. They're the losers. Let's get them out.
All right. Cat Boyd.
Well,
come on.
Well, first of all, I have to disagree with you if this is going to be about democracy, because...
No, hold on.
Thanks.
All right. Hold on.
Let me finish. Let me finish my views.
Hold on a second. There is a rule on question time that you listen to what the panel say, even if you disagree. You've had your chance. Hold on. You've had your chance. This is her first appearance on Question Time. Let her speak. Cat Boyd.
Thanks. Look, I think everyone's got a legitimate voice in this debate. The point about democracy in the United States is that Hillary Clinton actually won the popular vote, which shows... It shows the absurdities of the US electoral system, which shuts out large urban centres that are mostly working class, that are black, that are Hispanic. That's who's shut out of that process. Now, my issue sort of with the Trump and Farage thing, I mean, Nigel Farage is a bigot. Nothing more, nothing less. The man is a bigot and an embarrassment at that. But this isn't just about Nigel Farage, because what I see are political leaders treating Donald Trump as business as usual, like he's just another president of the United States. But I probably shouldn't be surprised about that Theresa May wants to build a good relationship. Well, of course she wants to build a good relationship with someone like Donald Trump, because she is the party who, not that long ago, at your conference, spoke about lists for foreign workers. Of course she wants to build a relationship with a man that wants a database for Muslims.
So what
They're off the same pond.
So, Cat, what would you have the British Prime Minister or the First Minister of Scotland do, given that he's been elected?
Look, I'm not a politician. I'm an activist, and my interest is building a good relationship with the people who are at threat from Trump's views being legitimised. It's Black Lives Matter. It's the million women who are going to march on his inauguration. That's who I want to build a special relationship with.
Mayor in Somerset-Webb. Webb. I keep calling you Ward.
That's all right.
I don't know why.
I'll go back to the question, if
yes.
I may.
Go back to
Nigel
the question.
Farage, should he be our representative in America? No, of course he shouldn't. As you know, he can be friends with whoever he likes, but we have representatives, we have an embassy, so it won't be long before everything starts going through the proper channels. You know, Donald Trump has started with, you know, what they call the Lenin problem, which is when you have some kind of revolution, you arrive in government, you have no experience of government, you don't have the right people around you to build a government and to build a team. So, you know, the first couple of weeks are always going to be rather chaotic looking while you figure figure it out. So no, he most certainly shouldn't be any kind of representative for the UK. But coming back to what you were saying about him being moved to the House of Lords, I think that's an excellent idea, an absolutely excellent idea. You know, UKIP, whatever you feel about what UKIP thinks, they've pulled a huge amount of votes in the UK and they're totally non-represented in the House of Lords.
But how on
so
earth?
It makes sense to me that, and whatever you think about Nigel Farage, he's obviously very, very dedicated to his country, and he has millions of people who believe in what he wants. So it makes sense that his views should be represented in the House of Lords. That's a wonderful place to put him.
Let him stand for election.
Yes, you. He did.
And lost, exactly.
The one in the front row.
The thing that I don't really understand is why we're considering Farage at all, because he can't even get into Parliament. He doesn't represent me, he doesn't represent anyone, so why on earth would we have him representing us?
Hold on a second. I'll come to you, President. John Nicholson.
Not only did he lose once, he's lost multiple times, and now he thinks he'll get round the back door into the House of Lords. I'm entirely in favour of having an elected upper house. If we have to have one at all, I think our politicians should have to face the electorate. Yeah. But wasn't there a wonderful visual symbol, I thought, that gold door, and Trump and Farage standing beside that image of opulence? Now, remember, Trump was going to go to Washington to drain the swamp. He was going to go and stand up for the little guy. And look at the people who are on his shortlist so far for jobs. Lobbyists, insiders in Washington, and his family. He wants to employ all of his family, as far as I can tell. He wants to slash corporation tax. He wants to abolish inheritance tax. Who's that going to help? It's going to help people like him and not the little guy. Now, I suspect that people are going to wake up very soon in the blue-collar states and realise what a terrible mistake they've made electing him. But do we need Nigel Farage's interference? Absolutely not.
I mean, to be fair to your point,
to be fair to who?
To the lady in the front, her point, you mentioned that Farage is now being set up as a kind of intermediary. The only person, I think, who suggested that was Nigel Farage himself. I mean, that's why we're talking about this.
Well, he's basically running around going, me, isn't he?
But the other thing we have to... I mean, it's very odd this year, because clearly a lot of elections have gone the way that many politicians haven't wanted. And I was always brought up to believe that politicians should ask for voters for their vote, and then when they lost, they would learn lessons and they would listen and they would try and change.
Unless they're peers, of course.
Whereas this year, we've had politicians say, well, the voters didn't vote for me because they were stupid. They didn't vote for me because they were racist. They didn't vote for me because they're bigots. And that seems to be a very odd development in democracy, where the politicians are essentially blaming the voters for votes which happened. I mean, it's crazy.
I have two objections to Trump, really. Leaving aside all the stupid and horrible things he said about disabled people and black people and women and so on, just leaving that aside just for a brief moment.
OK, get to the point.
One is that he spends... In America, you can buy your way into high office. You can't even think of standing unless you're a multi-millionaire. And I really hope this country never, ever goes down.
But to be fair, he spent a great deal less than Hillary Clinton. It's very significantly less than her. So clearly you can't buy an election because she couldn't.
Well, Jeb Bush tried to buy.
All right, I'll take a couple of points, because we've talked quite a lot about Trump. Yes, you, sir, over there, last week. So I want to move on. You in the... Yes, in brown.
Yeah, it's
there,
just like Kwasi said. People are talking about Nigel Farage, who's a total irrelevant in the whole scheme of things. But the thing is, Donald Trump is now in power, and like Kwasi says, we just need to get on with it. Stop dragging our heels. The guy's going to be in power for a long time, and we've got so much trade and export going to the USA. We just need to adapt and get moving on it instead of moaning about it all the time.
I'm going to move on. We'll come to you on other points, perhaps, because we've got quite a lot of questions that you raised I want to get through. We're going to be in South London, by the way, I just say this now, next week, and we're going to be in Wakefield the week after that. Make a note of it, London and then Wakefield. You can apply the addresses on the screen, and I'll give it in more detail later. But let's move on to a question. This one from Prentice Baines, please. Prentice Baines.
How long will it take the UK Tory government to come up with a Brexit plan?
How long? John Nicholson.
Well, they say repeatedly, we're not giving a running commentary. That's the cliche. And, of course, they're not giving a running commentary because they don't have a plan. And we know that because we had that leak from Whitehall this week, which reveals that we're going to have to hire thousands of extra civil servants to deliver this. We know that because of the plunging value of the pound, because of Brexit, the total amount that we are going to have to contribute next year is going to be vastly increased. And we've got the absurd side of the Foreign Secretary arguing with the Chancellor of the Exchequer and arguing with Theresa May. Now, Theresa May said quite publicly last year, and in private too, that there would be a huge outpouring of jobs from the UK if Brexit won. And I fear that that's what we're going to see. Well, we're in a phony war at the moment because people haven't quite
They haven't realised what they've done.
They haven't quite focused on the reality of what's about to happen.
But you know.
Can I finish my answer? Then you can come in and you can give your answer. Of course, people have an absolute right to vote whatever way they want. But what we're seeing, what we're going to see, is a loss of confidence. We're seeing a huge decrease in investment. Companies are scared of investing because of Brexit. Brexit is a mess. There's no coherent plan about Brexit, and the sooner Scotland gets out of this mess and forges our own way, the better for all of us.
All right. Yes, go on.
In response to your comment that businesses have lost interest in the UK, there's an answer today that Google want to invest £1 billion into the UK. So that goes almost completely against your statement.
Kwasi, Kwarteng.
Can I just say, I mean, every single prediction for the immediate shock, the immediate term, has been proved false. They said there would be a recession, and thank God there hasn't been a recession. They said that in Q3, the Bank of England said we might go down to minus 1%. There was actually considerable growth. And more broadly, I want to say, yes, the electorate have spoken, but you've got to give them some respect. We've had, you've been on 2 referendums, you've lost both, and you've got to just take some sort of humility. You've got to actually be humble. And yet you wag your finger, you wag your finger and tell us how stupid we are, how thick we are, and how we're going to come round to your way.
Leaving aside the insults, the question that Prentice put was, how long will it take for the Tory government to come up with a Brexit plan? You're the Tory MP here on the seat. You voted for Brexit.
Absolutely.
So go on, what's the answer?
So the answer is there are 2 issues at stake, okay? There's the freedom of movement. Everyone says how terribly complex and how complicated it is. No, there are 2 very simple principles. There is the engagement with the single market, and there is the ability to control immigration and control the flow of people. We're not saying we're going to ban it. That would be insane. We want immigrants. But we want to have some control over that. Now, those are the 2 principles which the Prime Minister has said again and again that we want to keep. Now, it's up to our European friends, our European negotiating partners, to stake out where they are. And they've already said that before Article 50 is invoked, they're not prepared to have pre-negotiations. They're not going to engage in any conversation with the government.
So why not invoke Article 50 now
well,
and get
what we're
started
trying to
then?
do. But
we're not doing it until March.
But
what are you
you'll
waiting
remember...
for? You say you, hold on. No. You say you can't negotiate until Article 50 has gone through, but you're waiting until March to do Article 50.
But you also remember, David, that there was a court case which suggested that we needed a vote in Parliament. So that's complicated and confusing.
But you wanted to repatriate power to Parliament. Wasn't that the whole point about Brexit? Was to return power to Parliament. And when power is returned to Parliament by the judges, you cut up rough and get angry about it.
I don't mind that.
You, sir. No, not you, the man on your left. You.
I'd like to make a bipartisan point that would probably appeal to the whole panel.
I doubt it very much.
Well, I'll surprise you, David. So we've heard a lot about this, about the electorate have been treated as idiots. And I was a Remain voter, and a lot of my family were Leave voters. And that is a really important point. They're not idiots. They're angry. They're angry because the voting system doesn't reflect their views. It's the same in America. Antiquated system. UKIP, as you said, UKIP should have massive amount of representation in Parliament, and if it was proportional representation, they would have 100 seats or so. So I think that it's important to underline the civility we've lost from this debate, that people aren't idiots.
Okay. Chris Bryan.
Look, I was a Remainer, I am a Remainer, and I'll remain a Remainer until my dying day, and unless I have to become a rejoiner. Because in the end, it's a matter of it's like an article of faith for me. But I just believe that we as a country and my constituents in the Rhondda are better. Will be better, will be safer, will be more secure if we remain... Just let somebody else speak, Kwasi.
What did they vote?
Just let me... Honestly, really, just let me finish. Okay. Because I think that it's in all of our interests to stay in the European Union. In my constituency, they voted out. And I'm faced now, personally, with a really difficult quandary. I'm a person of conviction. I really care about this. And I went to visit a business just outside my constituency the other day. They make mass spectrometers. It's really good, high-tech job, really the kind of company we really want to prosper in this country. They're saying to me that if we're not a full member of the European Union, OK, but we still have to be a member of the customs union and of the single market, because otherwise they will have to take their business to Germany. Okay. So for me, how do I vote when it comes to Parliament? And of course it's got to come to Parliament. If we're going to take back control, let's actually have that control in Parliament, not just in number 10 Downing.
Well, your Labour Shadow Chancellor says you must be more positive about Brexit. You don't sound as if you're being very positive about Brexit.
This is not... I'm not decrying how the country's voted. I fully accept that. And I know in my own constituency that slightly higher percentage voted out than across the rest of the country. So I'm faced with a real personal quandary, which is that my conscience says, how can you possibly vote to leave? And that includes Article 50, because the moment you sign up to Article 50, that is a 2-year course, and then you're out. End of. But at the same time, the democratic principle is a really important one. That is another article of faith for me. So that's why I want to know what the plan is. Theresa May, I want to know what the plan is, because I can't sign this off as an MP until I know what that plan is, whether the jobs in the UK are going to be protected, whether we're going to turn our backs on Europe, or whether this is just going to be really, really bad. And Kwasi, we haven't left the EU.
OK, fine. I think, Chris, you've made your point. The woman there in the fourth row, please. Yes. The woman in the fourth row, you.
You're speaking earlier there about respecting the review of the electorate, but the electorate in Scotland voted to remain. So...
And you in the front, yes.
I think what some people in Scotland seem to forget is we're a part of the United Kingdom. We've voted to remain a part of the United Kingdom, so it was the United Kingdom that's made their vote. 17.4 million people, not Scotland, the United Kingdom.
Mayor in Somerset-Webb, let's come back to the question that Prentice here asked, and we come to you if you want, Prentice, in a moment. How long is it going to take? Because you've heard what Chris said. He can't vote for Article 50 until he knows what the plan is. It would be wrong to do so.
Well, I don't think he's going to know what the plan is when he gets to Article 50. I mean, the thing about Brexit, which was much discussed before the vote, was that it's not just an instant thing. It's a process. And I think possibly we all get very emotional about it, we get very wound up about it, but were we to be around in 100 years looking back and reading what was happening in history books, we would say that the UK made some minor changes to its trading arrangements with its next-door partners. Because in the end...
That's all it is?
In the end, that's what it's going to turn out to be. You know, we will have a process, we will end up with access to the single market one way or another, we will end up with more control over immigration than we had before. It's not going to take a year, it's not going to take 2 years, it may take longer. But once you separate all the emotion, all the virtue signalling, all the moralising from the whole thing, that's what's happening here. It's a change in our trading arrangements with our neighbours. That's it. Deep breath, everybody.
I think it's going to take a very long time for any type of plan to emerge. I mean, first of all, it's important to remember that this referendum was foisted on the general public because of a factional split inside the Tory party. We then had the whole debate whipped into a frenzy by a rabidly right-wing press who made it about immigration. Then politicians who drove round in that Vote Leave bus are liars. They lied. They said 350 million. They lied. I mean, now by their own admission, they lied. They said that £350 million a week that went to Europe would go into the NHS, and their lies are now unravelling.
OK, come to the question of what's going to happen now. How did you vote, by the way?
I didn't vote. I abstained.
Why?
Well, I mean, look,
Sorry.
technically, I wasn't.
You're sitting here listening to you. You're sitting listening to your opinion. You didn't have an opinion, you didn't give it.
No, that's not true.
That's very true. You didn't use your vote.
Let her answer the question.
Technically, I was out of the country at the time that the vote took place, right? But just because, I didn't, pick one side doesn't mean I don't have strong views about the other. I mean, if someone asked you, would you rather go for dinner with George Osborne or Boris Johnson, you would probably have quite a strong view about that, but have to choose neither.
So
I think there are legitimate criticisms to be made of the European Union, but I also think that the way...
dinner is a one-off experience. This affects us for decades to come. That's the difference.
Let me finish. I think that there are legitimate criticisms to be made of the European Union. Right? But the fact of the matter is that the way that the referendum itself was conducted was disgraceful. I mean, we were told time and time again, this is about immigration,
We've been over that, but do you agree with
trade or economics.
Do you agree with what Merrin said? When we look back at it in 100 years, which we won't be able to do, but when people look back at it in 100 years' time, they will see it as minor changes to trading arrangements and nothing more than that. Do you agree? Do you think that's likely, Kat? Is that how you think it'll be? Or do you think it's a cataclysmic event?
I think it's a really major event. I mean, the words that Nicola Sturgeon used, of course, is that this is a material change. This is a material change in circumstances. I mean, we've talked a lot tonight already about, democratic principles, but two things. I mean, Scotland in May 2015 overwhelmingly rejected the Tories in the general election, and yet we're tied into a Tory government. Scotland votes 62% to stay. Scotland... And that's...
I don't think it's just about money and trade. I think it's as much as anything, it's about the security of the West. And my biggest anxiety is that the person who has laughed most in the last few weeks, both with Trump and with Brexit, is President Putin.
OK. The woman up there at the back. Now, let's talk about process. The woman up there in the second row from the back, yes.
Well, I just wanted to say that although Kat didn't vote, the fact that she's a Scot and didn't vote is probably partly also because she knew that it was all so good to be irrelevant. Our vote in Scotland is completely and utterly disrespected.
All right, you sir in the front here. You, sir. Let's hear from someone. Yes, you.
We've had approximately 300 years of a union. Britain has had since 1973 a union, and we're given the right with Article 50 to leave that union. Why haven't we got that with our union?
But you had a referendum on the very issue.
Right. No. We don't need a referendum. Article 50 can still be brought. So the scientists and the historians are all telling us from Arbroath, what was written down then, we could, without any problem, bring Article 50.
But of course, Mrs Thatcher said that the election of a majority of SNP MPs to Westminster would give Scotland the moral right to independence. It's not something, obviously, that we now argue, but that was her position.
Exactly.
Is that your position?
No.
But you're quoting Mrs Thatcher.
I'm just trying to make friends with the audience.
You say in the third row from the back, with spectacles and dark hair, yes. Yes, that's you.
The SNP went into 2014 with a manifesto, well, a white paper, so to speak, that was probably about that thick. The bill before Parliament for Brexit has just come out today, and it's 3 lines long.
OK.
What's that
about? OK. And you, sir, yes. I'll take a point of view, yes.
I think everybody's focusing on the wrong thing with Brexit. People are focusing too much on the economy, and there is going to be a big economic downturn. The IPPR and IFS recently predicted that by the end of the decade, Scotland's block grant through the Barnett formula is going to suffer by £3.3 billion. My point actually was to start, if we come out of the EU, the first thing the Tories are going to do is rob you of your workers' rights, employment rights, human rights. We're going to go back to the workhouses.
OK. We've had a lot of talk about Scotland and Scotland's relationship with the decision, and Scotland being in favour of Remain and the rest of it. So I'd just like to move on to a question from James Miller, and let's just take that on this issue. James.
Hi. My question is, has Nicola Sturgeon overestimated her support in Scotland for another independence referendum?
Yes. So, and everyone throughout the UK is interested in the question of whether there will be another referendum. Miriam, what do you think?
I don't think she has overestimated her support. I think she knows perfectly well that she hasn't got enough support to win another referendum, which is why she hasn't called one, and why I don't think that she will. I mean, she knows that circumstances have changed quite dramatically since the last referendum, which she lost, in that the oil price has fallen. The financial situation for Scotland is a lot worse than it was. And if she were to call it on the basis that there's been a material change, i.e. that the UK is no longer going to be in the EU and Scotland would like to be in the EU, she's asking people to make a very different choice to the choice last time, to move from one union, which is gradually devolving power, to another union, which is gradually taking power. You know, the stated purpose of the European Union is to gradually bring people together and to remove sovereignty from nations. And at the moment, that's the opposite thing that is happening between Scotland and the UK. The finances would also be extremely difficult. You know, Scotland at the moment is a net beneficiary of the fiscal union between England and Scotland. That hasn't always been the case, but it is at the moment. However, Scotland would be a net contributor to the EU. So it works the other way around. There's a lot of very difficult things there. I think it's very unlikely that she will call a second referendum, because I think she knows it's very unlikely that she would win one.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. It'd be better if people who shout out stuck their hands up and then had a proper say so everybody could hear you. But let me just go first to John Nicholson, who, of course, said you don't hold a referendum until you think you're going to win. Do you think Nicola Sturgeon's overestimated her support for another one? Do you want another one?
Of course I want another one, because I want Scotland to be independent, and that obviously has to come through a referendum. So I do want a referendum. Look, everybody knows, you just have to listen to this audience. Everybody knows that Scotland is divided on the constitutional question. Some people mention independence, half the audience here cheer, the other half boo. It's a very contentious issue, but what is clear is the direction of travel in Scotland. You know, I remember when there was vigorous debates about Scottish devolution, and John Major, Prime Minister, predicted all sorts of disasters. I find it very difficult to meet anybody now who admits that they voted against Scottish devolution. And I think the direction of travel is obvious in Scotland too. To answer your question directly, I think the First Minister knows, obviously, what the state of play is in Scotland. And if there were another referendum today, it would be incredibly close. But I can tell you this. When I go around my constituency, East Bartonshire, which voted quite heavily against devolution, against independence, I talk to a number of business leaders who say that they were persuaded to vote against independence because they were promised that if they did so, Scotland would remain in the European Union. That promise is broken.
Chris Brown.
Well, if I'm honest, I've kind of given up on predicting what happens in elections because it's gone really badly this year. Everything I predicted has not come to pass. So
no bets.
I've never been a betting man anyway, and if I'm honest, the thing I don't like about referendums is it does divide the country, inevitably in a sense. It divides you 50-50 or nearly 50-50, and that is quite painful in families and in our political life. And to be honest, I hope you don't have another referendum at the moment. Obviously, I'm Labour. I'm a Welsh MP. I prefer Scotland to stay in the Union. But that's not even my biggest reason, to be honest. It's more because I think that in these next few years we are going to need to unite if we're going to survive the Brexit issue. And I say this very gently to John. I do sometimes, and I feel this in Wales sometimes as well, I think when we have devolved powers, we should get on and use them properly. The Scottish Parliament could, the Scottish Government could, if it wanted to, have ended Abellio's franchise for the railways and could have brought the Scottish Railways back into nationalised ownership. And I don't know why they didn't.
Is Labour in favour? Sorry, can I just clarify, because you made that point twice, and if I understand you correctly, you support it being taken back into public ownership. But
yes.
Is that the Labour position? Because
yes.
Labour's had years in government where it did not nationalise the railways. Why not?
I want to go to the woman there in black, in the third row from the back. Yes, you.
You can't just keep holding a referendum until you get the answer you want to.
I understand that obviously this is it's a heated issue, but I think that the independence referendum, I thought it was a great thing. Like, up and down the country, people were engaging in politics. I thought it was a great thing. And what happened was, in Scotland, where we've traditionally been seen as having a really low voter turnout, over 90% of people turned out to vote. And for me, that proves that, see, when your vote actually matters, then we'll turn up in our millions to participate in deciding our futures.
What do you say? What do you say?
I did. I voted. I campaigned and voted. I campaigned and voted for yes in the 2014 independence referendum.
All right, but they're saying not in the Brexit
Well,
one.
I think that there were some impossible choices put on the table
right.
during the European debate. I don't think it means that you don't have a voice. I wouldn't say that the 50% of people in the United States who didn't vote don't have a voice and can't criticise Trump.
All right, the man in the pale blue shirt. I'll come to you, Kwasi. The man, you, sir, on the gangway, yes.
Yeah, just picking up on the point about Chris Bryant made earlier on. The white paper from 2 years ago, we talked about referendums and lies. The white paper 2 years ago assured us that Scotland could be a fully independent country within 18 months of a referendum yes vote. We now find out that the DWP transfer of welfare benefits to Scotland are going to take at least 3 to 4 years to be transferred. So clearly, there's a picture being painted there, and the picture is that that was a pack of lies as well.
Kwarteng.
Can I pick up on the lady's point about the referendums, having a referendum until you want the right answer, or you get the right answer? I think that's a very, very good point. And that doesn't actually contradict what you were saying. Yes, it was a very passionate debate. I think the turnout was 85% in the independence referendum. But then at the time, it was thought that this would settle the issue for maybe 20 years. But of course, it hasn't, because what Nicola Sturgeon has done, going back to the original question, has now raised the issue of a referendum again. And what she can't do, what she mustn't do, is simply hold a gun to our heads and threaten a referendum whenever she doesn't get what she wants. I think there has to come a point where the settled view of the people expressed in a referendum is actually fulfilled and people accept the result.
That doesn't quite work.
OK, but hang on. The woman there in the white jacket. Yes.
It's not that I'd ever rule out there being another referendum at some point in the future, but it's the fact that it was only 2 years ago that we had a referendum, and we're talking about it again, and what has changed since then, apart from the Brexit result?
But you know something? Sorry.
Let's hear what you're saying.
I voted to Scotland to remain in part of the UK, and also for Britain to remain part of the EU. My boyfriend, he voted the opposite, to leave Scotland to leave the UK and for Britain to leave Europe. So I don't see why there's that natural...
Are you still speaking to each other?
Just about. But no, I don't see there's that natural assumption that just because you'd want Scottish independence, you'd also want Scotland to still be part of the EU. So what has changed apart from that assumption?
But Kwasi, I just come back to you. If as you were saying, Scotland voted no to independence from the UK, but then yes to remaining in the EU, there is a conundrum. Yeah, How can it be resolved? Well, how can this country resolve
it? There were two different issues, and one of the ladies in the audience suggested the answer, really, is that when we voted for Brexit, it was a United Kingdom vote. And it's a one country. Yes. It still is one country. Yes. And the question... And I very cheekily said that you lost 2 referendums, which you did, but that was the issue. The first referendum was to decide whether the United Kingdom still had a future as a country. The first referendum was to decide whether the United Kingdom still had a future as a country. And thankfully, the Scottish people decided that they wanted to keep the United Kingdom. And then it was on that basis that we had the Brexit vote.
And
We
how
voted as a
damaging,
country.
though, how damaging is it, the Brexit vote, in terms of Scotland's desire to remain or not remain in the United Kingdom? That on Brexit, they went the opposite way to the way the rest of the UK
I think it's
went.
a more, as the lady said in the audience, I think it's a more complicated picture. The blind assumption that simply because you voted to stay in, just to leave the UK, means that you would want to stay in the EU, I think is an assumption. I don't think it's borne out by the facts. I also think that what Marion said about the economic environment is also true. It's a more difficult economic environment. There is more uncertainty, and it's a slightly different question. And
But
I
you've,
think
you've created the uncertainty by plunging us into this crisis.
Well, look, it's not a crisis. It's not by having. I'm sorry. Hang on. But
which crisis?
The crisis that is Brexit. Because I completely agree. This was set up to resolve internal Conservative Party issues. It was not something the country wanted, and the result, I think, is going to be disastrous for us. Not just Scotland, but England too.
No, I think it is important to say, if you talk to businesses around Scotland, which I'm sure you do, and I do as well, and you ask them what is the thing they worry about the most, they don't say Brexit, they say another independence referendum. They
You
say
must
that
be
all
talking
the
to different... You're talking...
comes from worrying about another independence referendum. If you talk to financial firms in Edinburgh about what scares them most, they say another referendum. They do not say Brexit.
You're talking to different people from me, I have to say.
All right, the woman in the second row, you've both said that twice now, so yes, the woman in the
Just back to the original question, the only reason Nicola Sturgeon said she would call a second referendum is if there was substantial change in our situation. Scotland being dragged out of the EU against their will is substantial.
You say no. All right, let's hear the alternative view, and then we'll go on to another question. You say yes. You're saying rubbish about what she said.
Yeah.
Why?
For me, I think the worst-case scenario is out of the UK, but in Europe, because we're going to be governed by a government that's further away, and we have no control of what we say. So that's the worst-case scenario. Out of the UK, in Europe, awful nightmare.
So you're for staying in the UK and leaving Europe?
I think that's a nightmare.
What?
Absolutely. No, out of the UK. Say that again, sorry.
You're for staying in the UK, but out of Europe.
Absolutely.
And you're happy with that?
Every time.
Every time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. I'll take one point for you, and then I think we must go on.
You keep talking about how this will be seen in history as just a slight trade deals and businesses, but for the ordinary person that isn't a business leader, isn't a politician, who potentially will see their MAR might increase by 10p, their products become smaller. If that happens to various products, your shopping bill is going to increase substantially. And for people who are living in low incomes, that is a huge impact and that is a huge uncertainty in their life. That is what Brexit does. Not for the multimillionaires who can weather that increase in prices, but for the people in low incomes, this is a huge change in their
and for the country, because they're now predicting. Remember, the Tory government said when they came to power in 2010 they were going to get rid of all the deficit by the end of that Parliament by 2015. There's still a substantial deficit now, and by the end of the period that we're talking about, the government now expects that it'll be a £100 billion deficit, largely because of the increase that's happened because of Brexit. They haven't got an economic strategy for the country, and they haven't got a plan on Brexit.
We have the autumn statement coming next week, so we shall have an answer to whether they have a strategy or not, perhaps then.
Well, they haven't.
I mean, what we mustn't do, and which we do all the time, on my colleagues on this panel, is just do that on the country all the time. You're prophesying doom, you're prophesying misery, you're prophesying some kind of disaster, you're saying it's a crisis.
The IMF now think that the UK is going to be the fastest growing economy in the G7 this year, having said it was going to be a disaster. Fastest growing economy in the G7.
We haven't left yet.
No, but the predictions were for an immediate crisis. There is no immediate crisis.
There would be immediate shock as the trend.
I don't remember your sunny predictions about Scottish independence.
Yeah, I remember Project Fear.
Okay. All right, very briefly, sir.
We've been talking about what we were told about the referendum, and we shouldn't have another one because there's been no material changes. This is from you, sir. Just another one of the Tory lies. But in 2014, we were told in Stirling by a Tory Member of Parliament that there would be no change to our military situation in Scotland. 2 days ago in the Observer, well, 1 day ago actually, Wednesday, we find out that 1/5 of our military accoutrements in Scotland will disappear.
Right.
Who's been telling lies?
Okay. Well, we can't go. I want to go on. I want a question. All right. I want to go into a question from Laura Bridges, please. Laura Bridges, please.
Both Donald Trump and Jeremy Corbyn are seen as anti-establishment figures. Can Corbyn win an election as Trump did?
Anti-establishment. Cat Boyd.
I think I'm probably the only person on the panel who is a supporter of Jeremy Corbyn. I'm not a member of the Labour Party, but I really like what he's got to say. I disagree with him. I disagree with him on independence. I think Jeremy Corbyn, you know, would be in with a chance if it wasn't for the disgraceful behaviour of the PLP, the fact that there's a media smear campaign against them, and the fact that the Tories have just recarved all the boundaries in terms of the constituencies. I think he's up against it. He's up against a rigged system. You know, I think the Labour Party was unelectable in Scotland a long time before Jeremy Corbyn came along.
Okay. Mayor in Somerset-Webb. Mayor in Somerset-Webb. Please, Marion.
Thank you. I think I'm going to make a point about Trump first, which is that he didn't so much win as Hillary lose. If you look at the votes, you'll see that, you know, the Republican votes were pretty much where they were at the last election. It's just that she lost an awful lot of votes and an awful lot of people didn't vote. So it's very tempting to see this as a great win, but in fact it was just not a loss, which is a slightly different thing. The gap in the polls between Corbyn and the Tories at the moment is absolutely huge. The other votes that have gone ways that people haven't expected have been very, very close. You know, the independence vote in Scotland, the Brexit vote was very close. The election in the US was very close. The gap in the polls for Corbyn is absolutely vast. It's a slightly different thing. Also, if you look at it in the context of protest votes, which a lot of people do, Scotland has somewhere to protest vote. It's got what was the SNP and now we like to call the Scottish Government. It has somewhere to protest vote. The UK had a protest vote already with Brexit. Is it going to go down another so-called anti-establishment route and vote for Corbyn? I think it's unlikely. Each region only needs one go at telling the elite what they think, and we've had ours.
All right. Chris Bryant.
Well, I hope Labour's going to win a future general election, but I think at the moment we're in a very difficult state. I mean, it's just fact. You know, you only have to look at the polls, and let's face it, polls haven't been very good this year, so maybe they're very wrong. But the truth is the Labour Party has to unite if it's to win a general election, and I will do everything in my power to try and make sure that that happens.
But you quit the shadow cabinet.
Yes, I quit the shadow cabinet.
And you said when you did, of Jeremy Corbyn, if you refuse to step aside, I fear you'll go down in history as the man who broke the Labour Party. And that's why... is it Jeremy who broke the Labour Party or the PLP who's breaking the Labour Party?
And that's why I say that I think the Labour Party needs to unite. And we had a second leadership election, and that issue is settled and done and dusted.
So you're now behind him, are you now?
Well, it is as far as I'm concerned. That's all. I can only speak for myself in this.
Of course.
I'm not a front bench anything. I'm just little old me now. So, and my view is that I do want to change the world in many of the same ways as Jeremy does. And I think some of the anger that you saw in the United States of America that led people to vote for Trump, I think that they were going down the wrong route in voting for Trump to try and meet the problems that they had. But I was chatting to somebody who's recently joined the Labour Party in my own constituency the other day, and he's joined because of Jeremy. And he said, look, the big problem is that 15 years ago, I was paid more per hour as a plasterer than I am today. And there's an absolute fact out there, which is that ordinary working people have suffered a collapse in their disposable income over the last 15 years, and we are all, the whole political class, are to blame for that. And we have got to change the way we do our politics so that we really do become a more fair, egalitarian country.
So why... Sorry, look, I'll come to you. If you say all that, why did you leave Jeremy Corbyn then? Why did you say you'll go down as the man who broke the Labour Party? I don't understand it.
Well, because I disagreed with some of the policy positions that Jeremy has adopted, not all of them, you know, Jo Cox was probably right when she said that we have far more that unites us than divides us. That may actually be true of everybody on the panel, incidentally, and for that matter in the room. Look, that moment is done. Jeremy is the leader of the Labour Party and has every right to run the Labour Party as he chooses, and I will do everything. I'm still doing all the fundraising for the Labour Party and for Jeremy and the Labour Party, because I want, apart from anything else, I represent one of the poorest constituencies in the land, and people in the Rhondda would want to say, this country is too unequal, it's unfair, it means that kids don't get an equal chance to get on in life.
We're not fighting the election, we're talking about the politics of where things stand at the moment. The question was, can Corbyn win an election as Trump did? Kwasi?
Well, my view is that people take Corbyn as a joke. They think he can't win, that he's some sort of crazy, eccentric uncle. But actually, if you look at what's happened the last 18 months, just 18 months, the Tories were not meant to win a majority. I think you could get 8-1 the day before the election. Corbyn wasn't meant to win the first time round. Brexit wasn't meant to happen. And Trump was never going to be president. And all four of those things in 18 months have happened. So I am someone who takes Corbyn very seriously as a political opponent. I think things can happen. It's an uncertain world. And he is a threat. He could get elected. I hope that he doesn't, because I think he'd be a disaster. But I take the threat seriously.
OK. The man in the second row there was hand up. Yes, you, sir.
I think actually it was the PLP that was responsible for Labour's demise, to be honest. Yeah.
Do you think Corbyn can win because Trump set the example of somebody coming from behind?
I don't think it's got anything to do with Trump, to be honest.
And you, sir, what do you think?
Do we really think we can go back to the days of the strikes and the unions ruling the roost?
No.
Nobody wants that again.
Why not? There was a shout. Yes.
Nobody
all
wants
right.
that again.
And you on the gangway there, and then I'll come to you, John. Yes.
Just to agree with Chris Bryant there, he made the point that the MPs, elected MPs and the governments are responsible for the demise or for what the working man takes home nowadays. Personally speaking, I earn less now than I did 7 years ago, whenever the coalition government came into power. I believe there'll be many people like me. But what the MPs and the government failed to recognise is that in the 7 years that has taken place for me to lose money and still be earning less, they have had an average of 31% pay rises over that period of time.
John Nicholson.
Well, here's one very big difference. Jeremy Corbyn is a decent man, and Trump is not. So, and let's not just get too depressed about the United States. As we sit here, they're still counting the votes in America, and some of the estimates have Hillary Clinton perhaps as much as 2 million votes ahead of Trump. And she should be president were it not for their bizarre, outdated system, which is there for all sorts of historical peculiarities. Look, one of the problems in the States was that the press treated Trump as a clown and didn't subject him to the kind of scrutiny that he should have had until it was far too late. That will not happen in the United Kingdom with Jeremy Corbyn. I wish the Labour Party in England well, but as we know,
I wish the SNP well in England as well.
As we know, I mean, the Labour Party in Scotland, they're now incredibly divided. The leader is against independence. The deputy leader is for independence.
No.
It's difficult to see how they can go in with a coherent platform into the election. And the SNP has largely replaced Labour in Scotland.
Thank you. Thank you. We've got a couple of minutes left. I want to take a question from Suzanne Stewart, please.
Post-truth has been named as Word of the Year. Is this a true reflection of modern politics?
Yeah, this will affect you all on the panel. Post-truth has been named as Word of the Year by the Oxford Dictionary, which says it's avoiding objective facts in influencing public opinion and instead appealing to emotional and personal belief. You have to be brief on this. You start, Cat Boyd.
Yeah, it's a very strange concept. I mean, I think that, in a sense, we are post-truth because, people like Donald Trump and Nigel Farage get to portray themselves as anti-establishment when clearly they are genuinely members of the establishment.
So it is a true reflection of modern politics,
Well,
the idea that post-truth...
Yeah, but I think that part of the issue is that we have a political class that is increasingly out of touch with the realities of ordinary people's lives. I mean, the reason people like Donald Trump are being elected is because globalisation is failing. The economic model that we have right now has been an absolute failure. Now, Hillary Clinton's a defender of globalisation, and there was a candidate in the United States that was anti-globalisation, inclusive, progressive, and that was Bernie Sanders.
Okay.
And he would have won. And he would have won. I just want to come back...
I've got to stop it. We've only got 3 minutes. I've got to get around the panel. Kwasi Kwarteng.
I think post-truth, going back to what I said earlier, was invented by people who are very, very disappointed about the referendum election, and they said, well, all the people who voted to leave...
What do you understand by post-truth?
I understand the fact that they think there's a narrative that people don't know the truth, that politicians are lying all the time, and the people are being deceived. And I'm not... That's the bit... I'm not arguing about that, but that's always happened. That's always happened. I don't think 2016 is different in that way.
Sorry,
and
when you say you're not arguing, you're not agreeing that politicians always lie.
No,
you're saying you're not arguing with the analysis.
I'm saying that politicians do not lie any more in 2016 than they have done in the past.
All right, Miriam, what's your take on this?
I'd actually agree with that. The whole idea of post-truth is connected to this idea of people living in social media bubbles and not seeing things they don't want to see, and being in groups that always agree with them.
Is that true? Does that happen?
I think it's always happened. Absolutely always. Everyone has always surrounded themselves with people who believe the same things as you do. That's what pubs are for. That's what parties are for. It's what the people have always done exactly this. Everyone has always lived in what we now call a Facebook bubble, but we used to call a friend bubble or a pub bubble or a village. And post-truth is exactly the same. This is not new. The idea that politicians and activists appeal to the emotions of people using numbers that are kind of true but not completely true, that could be interpreted in one way, could be interpreted in another way. That's just the art of persuasion and politics. It's not new.
So post-truth shouldn't be a word of the John
No,
Nicholson.
absolutely not.
If you're a blue-collar car worker in Detroit and Donald Trump has promised you that he'll give you back your industry and your jobs, you're not going to be satisfied with post-truth. You're going to feel enormously betrayed. It's a terrible, cynical word. It's enormously depressing. I'm not cynical about politics. I think good people go into politics across all the parties because they believe in things. So I'd like us to return to everybody trying to provide the truth, at least the truth as they see it.
Okay. Chris Brown.
That would be post-truth.
My candidates for biggest post-truth element of the year were £350 million for the NHS written on the side of the bus. I think Donald Trump actually said in the election campaign that Ted Cruz's father had killed JFK. And lots of people believed it. But the one that worried me the most was I was campaigning in the referendum in Coventry, I think it was, and this man said to me, well, what's really wrong with the European Union is that America is a member. And I said, but it's not. And he said, yes, it is. It's typical. You politicians, you always lie. You lie, you lie. And I said, no, it's just not true. It's not true. And I must say that half the time at the moment in politics, I feel that's what it feels like. It's like, honestly, there is a truth. There are facts. Let's deal with facts and evidence-based policy.
All right. Time's up. That's the truth. That is the... It is the objective truth. And we'll be overrunning if I don't stop, sir, so I better get on with this.